Today, I want to talk about the real story of Love Quinn and you and how she ultimately found herself trapped, not by the physical confinement of Joe's glass cage, but the emotional prison she constructs for herself as she crafts their ultimate love story in LA. After an act of violence broke her brother and the death of her husband left Love a young widow, she sets her sights on a fresh romance with Will and fantasizes about starting a new family. But when Will is revealed to be Joe, who turns out to be a serial killer, Love revises her desires to account for the discovery, overlooking the giant red flags in favor of what she wants to believe. Love opens her heart to Joe and he readily returns the favor, lashing out at Love with violence but temporarily sparing her. She leaves the cage freely as Love was never officially imprisoned, but when the pair get married and move to the suburbs, Love becomes a captive in her own home until Joe inevitably kills her in the end. So why was Love so desperate to escape her privileged life in LA? How could she imagine a future with Joe when his character was so inconsistent? And how does Love's desire for unconditional love and acceptance ultimately lead her into caging herself? Let's talk about it. Long before Joe came into the picture, Love entered the world with her soulmate and best friend, her twin brother, Quinn. Through their shared experience of parental neglect, Love came to rely on her brother for emotional connection, and the twins developed a codependent relationship. When the kids reach their teens, their bond becomes strained as 40 is victimized by their latest au pair, Sophia. Love watches as her brother is fed drugs and abused, and when their mother, Dottie, overlooks what's happening to her son, Love takes the matter into her own hands. For a minute, maybe less. She knocks out her brother and kills the au pair, choosing to leave the bloody knife in 40's palm. While Dottie does seem suspicious of her daughter, she doesn't question the scene and uses her husband's wealth to pay off the police and bury the story. The implications of Love's violence are never addressed, and from it all, she learns that her family's wealth will insulate her from consequences. But when money can't soothe the emotional cost of 40, believing he killed the woman he loved, he falls deeper into addiction, while he simultaneously carries the secret that maybe he didn't do it. Their fractured twin bond can never recover as Love refuses to reflect on what she did to her brother. She incapacitated him to avoid being witnessed and traumatized him with the murder of Sophia on his conscience. Love believes that she protected 40, but families just can't heal from what happened, so she leaves her broken brother in LA and moves to Paris to pursue a new fantasy. Love starts attending cooking school where she meets her first husband, James. Brought together by a shared passion, she expected that he would also share in her dream of starting a family. But when Love presents the idea, James isn't on the same page, uninterested in having a baby. When he gets sick, Love dutifully cares for her husband, anticipating that he will change his mind once he gets better. But when James recovers, he doesn't want a baby, but a divorce, and Love can't accept that all of her investment is not paying off how she imagined. She escalates her pattern of incapacitation, planning to paralyze James through his food to stop him from leaving and, quote, talk it through. But her inexperience leads to inadvertently killing James, and as Love considers the death accidental, she never has to contend with that conversation reaching the same dead end, even if the wolfsbane drugging had worked. So she settles back into her family's dysfunction, continuing to work at a Navrin until the day that she meets Joe as Will Bettelheim. Love makes the first move to build a new relationship based on a deeper understanding, something more honest and real. She substitutes Will into her dream as Joe allows her to define him, and she takes the lead in crafting their love story. She tells Will who he is, invites him to meet her friends, and introduces him to her crazy family. Each step of the way, there is hesitation and friction from Will, but he always appears to come around to Love's vision in the end. So she overlooks every red flag and sign that it's not meant to be, as Love believes that she will fix him and show him how to heal, bonding them emotionally in the process. Love built her fantasy around that feeling, fixating on it above anything else to cope with the baggage of her broken family. When she discovers that Joe has been lying about his identity, she's too invested in the relationship that she's built up in her head to even consider letting it go. So she covers for Joe, using her family's money to pay off his ex-girlfriend, choosing to bury his secrets and overlook his violence just like her mother did to her. Love is blinded to the implications of Joe's dishonesty because the allegations that he's running from reflect the same shortcomings that she can't acknowledge within herself. She ends her relationship with Will, but tells her brother to keep Joe around, sending out her own mixed signals. Love steals Joe's keys from his locker after having her family's PI stalk him and breaks into his personal storage unit. She finds his cage and situates herself comfortably inside. Piecing together Joe's history with Guinevere Beck, Love adapts her new fantasy to the dark face of Joe, believing that it's the more honest iteration of him. But the Joe that exists is more than just his past, he's also the coward who would rather run than face it. When Love tries to lure out the real him, he doesn't take the bait and actually pulls further away. She's forced to compromise again when she discovers that he's fleeing, and she has to chase after Joe in a desperate attempt to change his mind. The first time Love finds him and professes her feelings, Joe stares at her and says nothing, but Love doesn't accept that and follows him to the storage unit where she finds Delilah locked in the cage. Love kills her like she killed the au pair, claiming she did it to protect Joe, but ultimately doing it for herself and the fantasy of her perfect family. But as Love undermined Joe's decision to let Delilah survive, her relationship will inevitably fracture under the weight of the truth. She believes that she's found her soulmate in Joe, and her acceptance of his darkness allows Love to channel her own. She thinks that Joe will understand her, as he explains his own motive for killing Delilah as the same that she will relay herself later. But Love takes it a step further, killing Joe's ex-girlfriend when she returns to expose him, maintaining that the woman was crazy even after Joe had confessed that everything she said was true. She clings to an imaginary Joe, a version she created in her head based on her experience and Beck's fictionalized reality. And when she opens up to him about the violence that she's done, Joe reveals that he idealized Love just the same. While she thought their shared darkness made them perfect for each other, she needed Joe to love her as she is, but Joe wanted to believe that love was pure. When she destroys that illusion, Joe attempts to kill her without hesitation. Love manages to save herself by offering Joe the chance to play the paternal protector to a baby daughter. But as he removes his hands from her neck and Love steps to safety outside of the cage, it's the emotional stranglehold of her own fantasy that Love hasn't fully escaped. They gloss over Joe's violence, and Love never reflects on ending up in the exact same position as unspecial and mediocre Guinevere Beck. Joe kneels in the doorway and says that he will earn back Love's trust, reassuring her that real love doesn't evaporate when things get hard. She believes him because she wants to, but his attempt to kill her should prove that this isn't true. Unfortunately, Love has suffered abuse at the hands of her own mother and accidentally killed her last partner, so Joe lashing out at her isn't considered a deal breaker. And as Love accepts Joe unconditionally in order to start her new family, she has to say goodbye to her brother. He's found out the truth about Joe and recognizes the risk to Love if he lets Joe survive. Love tries to talk him down, turning her dishonesty on 40 before threatening his access to her baby. He insists that he's trying to save her, as he's killing for his sister just like she killed for him, and Love can't control what she's unleashed, leading to 40 forcing Joe to his knees only to be shot by an inconvenient cop. So Love loses her twin in exchange for her soulmate and moves to the suburb of Madre Linda, where she becomes a new kind of captive, stuck in her empty, unfulfilling marriage. She struggles as she seems to have achieved her dream but still feels unhappy. To make matters worse, she's brought along the baggage of her toxic mother, defeating the purpose of starting over. The first time Joe has an affair, Love tries to save her family the same way she did before, killing their neighbor like she killed Delilah and the au pair. It appears to work for a while as the couple come together to weather the aftermath of her impulsive act, but they're emotionally disconnected, and Love's quiet dissatisfaction with her husband leads her into initiating an inappropriate affair with the neighbor's teenage son, Theo. Love has come full circle, engaging in the same behavior with the vulnerable Theo as Sophia did to 40. As she craves the obsession from her husband, Love accepts it from Theo because it's unrelenting, available, and naively intense. But his fixation is immature, and Love, taking advantage of Theo, positions her as the same kind of predator that she deemed worthy of death. She inevitably escalates her abuse, knocking out Theo to stop him from leaving after he uncovers her secret, but once again, it seems that she has accidentally killed him. To make herself feel better, she leaves the boy in the basement and reverts back into fantasy, delusionally planning to save her marriage by having another baby. But instead, Love is again faced with the demand for a divorce. She tried so hard to do things differently this time, and it led to the same dead end. Unable to adapt, Love resists her husband's request and plans to end his latest affair in the same frickin' way. It's worked less and less each time, and after one honest conversation with Marianne, Love changes her mind. Once Love recognizes Marianne as a mother, she chooses to spare her, but she hasn't learned anything real as she turns her attention to Joe. She decides that single motherhood doesn't sound half bad and tries to murder her husband on purpose this time. But in Joe's grounded reality, he obviously has a backup plan and kills Love with the same paralytic that she had previously used on James. Her last words reaffirm her mistaken belief that the couple are perfect for each other, unable to see that she wouldn't be dying if that were true. While Love grew up financially comfortable in a way that Joe never knew, she had a very different relationship with her mother. Where Joe is always trying to recreate his dynamic with her, Love is looking for a connection as deep as the one she originally shared with her brother. But nothing can replace the twinship they once had, and Love's escalating violence passing unchallenged enables her to internalize the wrong lessons. She never learns healthy boundaries or how to define herself on her own. Love claims that she's going to be different from her mother while she's effectively chasing the same end goal. Love traps herself in a marriage because it's what she thought she was supposed to do. She tries to work the steps to a perfect life, expecting to feel happy forever after if she does it all just right. But real life is complicated and messy. Plans fall apart, people change, and dreams die, and as emotional unavailability surrounds her, Love never learns to cope with all of the feelings that these things bring up inside. She chooses the cage for its safety and promise of exposing the darkest truths. Love doesn't see the cage as confinement because she has the privilege of leaving whenever she pleases. But she is never as free as she thinks. Chosen for Joe's latest love story, she is unaware that she will never escape his narrative. Despite lasting longer than Beck, bearing his child and fulfilling his fantasy, Love is killed by Joe when she becomes the most debilitating reflection of her husband, and he can't stand the way that she challenges him. Love's character arc was tragic. As both a victim and a villain, she embodied the dark duality of Joe and exposed the implications of his violence. Her choices were misguided, and she made the same mistakes for which she criticized her mother. But if there's any upside at all to the story of Love, at least she gets to spend eternity with her brother.